there was a very young couple who also wanted to set up the typical wagon-style tiny house, and the whole small town was against that. And for this reason, we did not write the name tiny house in our building permit.
Welcome to the Tiny House Lifestyle Podcast, the show where you learn how to plan, build, and live the tiny lifestyle. I'm your host, Ethan Waldman, and this is episode 260 with Bleeptrack, aka Sabine. Bleeptrack is an artist and creative technologist from Germany, and she documents the creation of her art and her tiny house life on her YouTube series, Work in Progress. I got interested in interviewing Sabine when I saw photos of her tiny home being craned into place in the backyard of another home. Her tiny home is actually a prefab model that is really beautiful and modern. It's a company called Coda, and I think that these modular prefabricated tiny homes are going to become more popular and more common in the United States. So I was curious to learn how they are regulated in Germany and Europe and what it's been like living in one. I hope you stick around for this great conversation with Bleeptrack, aka Sabine. Hey, it's Ethan. I'm a tiny house author, speaker, and teacher, and I'm the host of the Tiny House Lifestyle Podcast. I've been making the show for free for the past 5 years. But one thing that you might not have known about me is that I love coffee. If anything I've written or produced has helped you on your tiny house journey and you're looking for a way to say thanks, a coffee is a great way to do so. Head over to thetinyhouse.net/coffee to buy me a cup. I really appreciate your generosity and kindness. The Tiny House Lifestyle Podcast will always be free, and I bring you a fresh new episode every Friday morning. If you are able to chip in, I really appreciate it. Again, that website is thetinyhouse.net/coffee. All right, let's jump into this week's interview. All right, I am here with Bleeptrack. Bleeptrack is an artist and creative technologist from Germany. She documents the creation of her art pieces and her tiny house life on her YouTube series, Work in Progress. Sabine/Bleeptrack, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, super excited to have you. So tell me about your tiny house. It's a Kodasima. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. What is it?
Yeah, the company is called Kodasema, and it's a bit on the larger side of the tiny house. So the version that I'm currently live in is a Koda Loft Extended. So it basically consists of 2 whole rooms. So it's really on the bigger side of a tiny house.
Okay. And how many, do you know how many square meters it is?
I think it depends a lot on how you calculate. So I think they officially stated with 46 square meters.
Okay.
But there are like 2 mezzanines in there, and I think they fully count them in. And I'm not sure if this is the proper way to count it.
Okay.
But when I ask my cleaning robot, so the base square meters that it cleans is more on the 28 square meters.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean 46 square meters, just for the American listeners, I'm seeing that I just plugged that into a calculator. That's only 150 square feet. So it's not that big. Pretty tiny. You know, it's right in line with tiny houses here too. So this house is a modular home. So it was constructed, I'm guessing, in a factory somewhere and then like placed on a property, correct?
Exactly. They in my case, they fabricated in Estonia on their main fabrication site.
Okay.
Everything is ready. They built in the kitchen and toilet and everything, and then it get in my case it got shipped by ship to Germany, and from there it goes on the highway to my property, and then with a crane you set it up on the ground.
Yeah, and I you shared some fun photos of your house, you know, very high in the air, hanging off of a crane, which I'm sure was gut wrenching.
It was
to watch.
I was extremely nervous. The problem was that we had to lift the house over our neighbor's house, so it was quite a distance to lift, and it's really heavy. It's was about 15 tons, and
wow.
we had to ask for a crane company if they were even able to set it up, because we were not sure if the distance is too long, maybe. and it was a close call. So the biggest crane that they could deliver barely fit into the driveway.
Wow.
It was very close call, yeah.
So the property that you're on, is it a property that you own or you rent?
I own the property and I'm already living on this property for about 10 years now. And there was an older, very tiny, like regular house built on it.
Okay.
The problem is it was like super old. It could only be heated by wood.
Hmm.
And there was no proper chance to renovate it. And there was also no proper chance to build up a regular German house on it because the property is quite hard to reach. And this is why we decided for a tiny house in the end.
Yeah. So that was actually my very next question, like how did this compare to potentially building a house like on site? And it sounds like just reaching the site is a challenge.
Yeah, because like usually you would build like I'm not sure if you're familiar with the way of Germans build their houses. We build like very big like stone bricks and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And having all these vehicles driving up to this property and setting it up the regular way it would have been possible, but it would have been crazy difficult
Okay.
and also super expensive. And yeah, having a prefabbed modular home that we can just set up by crane, and it's set up in one day more or less,
Yeah.
was a fantastic solution for our housing problem.
Yeah. So I'm guessing you had to demolish the old house before you could place the new one.
Yes, sadly, like we hope that we could keep the old house, set up the new one next to it, and then demolish the old one. But sadly, with the building regulations, this was not possible. We more or less had to set it up at the same space or the same place.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we had we had to demolish it first, and luckily we could move into my parents for a few months until the new
Nice. Yeah.
house then arrived. Yeah.
And what did you have to do to kind of to create a foundation for the house? Is there a permanent foundation?
Yeah, we are from German building law. We are basically required to have a proper foundation.
Okay.
It's a concrete foundation, and we had to pour in. I think it was 10 concrete spots, basically. But there's different
Okay.
ways you can do it. You could also pour a concrete plate or something
The
similar.
pad.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Exactly like a pad.
I'm actually seeing that in the photo that shows the house up on the crane. You can kind of see the pad, and it looks like you poured, a bunch of concrete footings is what we would call them. But yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. So it just sits right down on those, and then I'm guessing, is it fully, hooked up to the grid in terms of electricity and water and things?
Yeah, it's fully hooked up. So from Kodasima, we got plans where all the connections should end up emerging from the ground. And then that was also really interesting. Like we prepared the site like from like after the specifications that we got. And then it was a bit like putting a thread through a needle hole because
Yeah.
like the Kodasema house has that super tiny hole at the bottom. And
Yeah.
you put in all the cables and all the water connections and
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
when you put it down with the crane.
Oh boy.
Yeah, but it worked out perfectly well. So we have fresh water, wastewater, electricity, and yeah, that's more or less it basically. And internet, wired internet connection.
I
Yeah.
like that. So the crane is up there, and you're like, okay, just 1 centimeter to the left.
Yes, exactly.
Wow, must have been a good crane driver.
Yeah, the crane people, they were amazing. They were also, I think, I'm not sure if they were, but they felt a bit nervous also, from what I can tell, because I think this was also not the typical job that they usually put on their cranes.
Yeah, you don't like to hear that the crane people are nervous. So, I'm looking at a photo of the outside of the house, and it almost looks like there are like several diagonal fins like along the roof line. Are those solar panels? Are those vents? What are those?
So it's a wood cladding.
Okay.
That has a paint on it. You can design the different colors on whatever you want.
Okay.
And yeah, so it's a wood cladding. You can also, I think you can get it in a metal cladding, but it makes it even more heavy and super expensive. So in wood is the usual type. and
Okay.
it's a flat roof. And on the roof,
Mhm.
we ourselves afterwards put on some solar panels now to be more
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
independent.
I think that's what I'm seeing is those solar panels.
Mhm.
So do you have a sense of like these modular builds are very, you know, intriguing. And I think that at least in the United States, I think that Europe has been much further ahead on this, that like modular building has almost been looked down upon. Like it's kind of like a less desirable option. And now that's obviously changing because the quality that you can build in a perfectly flat, perfectly temperature and humidity controlled factory is much better than what you can do on site. Um, so like, were there lots of other options? Were there like, what else did you compare this to, or did you just see this one and you knew that this was the one?
Yeah, I think we were super lucky on that one. So we made a trip to Estonia
Hmm.
during COVID because our
Hmm.
other holiday trip got canceled because all the stuff got canceled.
Hmm.
And yeah, totally by chance, we walked by the company who had some houses on display at the harbor, and
Uh huh.
we super liked them, and we had the chance to like look at one from the inside, and it was very interesting.
Okay.
And it was around the time where we were started to think, what should we do with the old house, or how should we
Yep.
proceed?
Yep.
And one thing we compared it to is House. That's a company
Hmm.
from Amsterdam. Also super
Okay.
interesting. Also very modular way of houses that they provide.
Hmm.
But yeah, like in the end, the interior design of the Coda was the one that most, I think, fit to our lifestyle, and
Okay.
we enjoyed the most. Yeah, and like overall, I think it's similar in Germany about modular. Or I think prefab houses already were a thing, but like more on the super large scale, and tiny houses becoming more popular, but it's still
Hmm.
sometimes very hard to get the permit to set them up. And I know
Yeah.
like a few towns away, a few years ago, we had a very big issue. Basically, there was a very young couple who also wanted to set up the typical wagon style tiny house, and the
Yep.
whole small town was against that, and
Oh.
they they had like it was going to lawsuits and was very problematic. And for this reason, we did not write the name tiny house in our building permit application, because we were worried everyone was
Smart.
remembering the tiny house issue. So we went with tiny prefab house or something. And it was, yeah, I think a good decision. I'm not sure. There's a lot of people still have this story in their head in my area.
That's smart. Just don't call it a tiny house.
Yeah. True.
Yeah. Um, so I love the kind of modern design of the home. But I definitely see that it's got a lot of glass. And I wonder, like, you know, I can see that you're near other houses. How has that been in terms of just like feeling like you're not, on display for your neighbors?
True. Yeah, I think setting up a coda like in the midst of a city is really maybe a bit of a weird feeling, or you need a lot of light curtains or something. And in my
Okay.
case, we have the property next to the forest. So the garden part is, yeah, like it's connected to the forest, and we don't see that much neighbors. There's one neighbor house a bit further away.
Okay.
We were fine with these, and the other neighbors are actually my parents. So this is
Okay.
also fine. We sort of share like a
Perfect.
window front, and that, yeah, that feels good, and I'm really happy about that because I enjoy the light situation a lot, and it would have been a shame to have curtains in front of that. I enjoy being in nature and having a look outside into the
Yeah.
garden and into the woods.
Yeah, and actually, I think in your 1 year tour video, I heard you mention that the windows are actually kind of mirrored on the outside, so it provides, they're almost like mirrored sunglasses.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, like at least it feels like this for me. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if they are actually super mirrored or something. But yeah, if you on a sunny day try to look in, you can't see much. And yeah, of course, at night you are a lot of on display when it's dark
Right.
outside and you have the lights on
Right.
inward.
It
Yeah,
fishbowl.
right.
So, how is this home heated? So your old home was wood only. How do you heat this one?
This one is only heated with an electric floor heating, basically.
Okay. Okay, so
and
like a
feels
radiant floor.
very weird at first. This is very unusual for German houses.
Uh-huh.
And now with the energy prices in Germany, they were super high in the last few months. So we were super happy to have the solar modules on top, on the roof
Right.
actually. Yeah, but overall, it feels great. I enjoyed a lot to have warm feet all the time.
I
And
know.
the first I think it was the first 2 or 3 days, the house needed time to heat up. So it took quite some time. It's a rather slow way of heating. So you can't adjust on super small
Right.
happenings. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, my understanding of that is like the floor is like a big heavy thermal mass and you heat it up slowly and then it retains that heat and kind of gently radiates it into the space. That's
Yeah.
really
Mhm.
cool that it's just that to heat the house. The kind of caravan style tiny houses or the tiny houses on wheels are very popular here, and they're more difficult to heat with just the in-floor radiant because there isn't enough of the thermal mass.
True. Yeah.
So you can warm up the floors, but they don't really do it. And I see pictures with snow on it, so I'm assuming that you experience, a very full and chilly winter.
Yeah, true. Like the south of Germany, I'm rather close to the rather close to the mountains, and we have winters with minus 20 degrees Celsius. I'm
Okay.
not sure what is in Fahrenheit, to be honest. But yeah, it's like
Cold.
rather cold, rather cold winters. And this was also maybe one decision point for the Kodas, because in Estonia they also have like super cold winters, and we were
Hmm.
sure that they prep their houses accordingly.
Nice. Nice. So your house has two different lofts, right? How can you tell us kind of how you use the space or how you've what spaces you've created inside of it?
Yeah, sure. So the first room basically is our living room kitchen combination.
Hmm.
This is like also where you would entrance the house,
Okay.
and this is the room that we also use most, I think. And the mezzanine on there is just also more of a like relaxing place where I enjoy sitting and, I
Hmm.
don't know, code on my project and have a nice view outside. And the back room is my office where I'm currently sitting and have my office desk. And also, we have a bit of storage space and some shelves.
Uh-huh.
And the mezzanine on the back room is for sleeping.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because I've seen following you on Mastodon and some of the photos that you do a lot of art, a lot of making. And so I'm guessing, and there's some very high tech looking equipment in some of the photos. So I'm guessing you don't have that all in the tiny house.
Yeah, it's true. I think like in on this way, I'm sort of cheating on the tiny house life a bit.
Oh,
So we also have an old garage left on the property, and this is where I have
okay,
like my big machines, like a laser cutter and a CNC machine, all the things that produce a lot of dust and stuff. These are
cool.
made. I think it makes sense to have it in a separate room.
Yeah, you don't need that stuff inside of your house. You don't want that dust.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Also, I feel like I wish I lived nearby because I've always wanted a friend with a CNC machine. It seems like a very
If you
handy
happen
thing to have.
to come around in South Germany,
Yep.
feel free to hop by.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Um, have you ever used the CNC machine or any of those kind of things that you use for creating art to like make a part that you need for the house or like repair something in your house?
Yeah, partly. So, but it was more my partner. My partner built how would you call it? Like a TV stand desk thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that perfectly fits into the living room, because it's a bit hard to find matching furniture. I think
It
like
is.
a lot of furniture is already built in, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, like this specific part, furniture part, we didn't find anything that made sense. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we crafted this on our own. And then there's like some tiny, some tiny parts maybe that we put in on a 3D printer and yeah, made it
Nice.
work. But I have to say, like, because the kitchen comes built in and already like fits so perfectly, there was not much to add actually.
Yeah. So how in the photos I don't have a sense of like what the storage spaces are in the house. Like are there built-in storage spaces or did you have to add like furniture to store your clothes and things?
It depends a bit on how you use the rooms, because I think the room that I use as office is usually intended to be used as sleeping room basically.
Okay.
And then you have the mezzanine space free, and that can have a lot of storage. So you could
Mhm.
put a lot of stuff in there. But because we
Mhm.
use it differently, we had to figure out a better way for us to make it work with storage. And
Mhm.
we ended up to buy a lot of black paper carton boxes. This is where
Okay.
we store everything in. So it
Okay.
doesn't look too cluttered, but we can just throw stuff in there. So
Yep.
I have two boxes for my clothes, and I don't know, like a box for my knitting stuff and another box
Mhm.
for my paper stuff. And for
Excellent.
my partners, it's similar. And then we have just like two shelves where we put all these boxes in and have a label on them, and then that, that's how we go currently.
Nice. Nice. So it probably helps to be somewhat minimalist.
Yes, I think so. And yeah, we had to declutter quite a lot coming from the old house to the tiny house. That was a very hard process to get rid of all the stuff and find out what we actually need and what we don't need.
Yeah. It always is. And it's an ongoing challenge too. It kind of never ends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um so let's see. I wanted to ask you about your tiny espresso maker. I'd never
Oh
seen
yes.
that before. And it looks like it's a little like a hand crank kind of thing. How does
Yes,
what is it
yeah.
called and how does it work?
It's called Pico Presso,
Okay.
and I think there's also one which is called Nano Presso. They are quite similar, and
Okay.
I think the Pico Presso is the newer version, more or less. And yeah,
Okay.
it makes a double shot espresso, and it's like the size of, I don't know, like if you put your two palms together, that's about the
Yep.
size you have. So it's super easy to store away in a drawer or somewhere.
Okay.
And the one thing that you also need is a grinder, and
Okay.
so it makes sense to buy a proper good hand grinder where you can dial in
Yep.
the
Yep.
grind settings very fine grained. Otherwise, it gets hard for espresso. Yeah,
Yep.
and I enjoy espresso a lot, but there's no chance to have a proper full blown machine in a tiny house. At
Yeah.
least not
Yeah.
at least not for us.
Yeah. No, I'm a bit of a coffee nerd myself and
Nice.
I'm intrigued.
Oh
Definitely.
yeah, I can like yeah, totally try it. It's a super fun device.
It looks fun and it looks like it like it's a good hand strengthening exercise too.
It's true.
It's like, like when you hurt your hand and the physical therapist gives you like that ball to squeeze to
Oh,
strengthen
absolutely.
your hand.
Yeah.
It's just, you've got it right there.
You also train a bit of your heat resistance because you need to heat up
Oh.
the little thing quite heavily, because you put in boiling water more or less, and it's just like a plastic
Oh.
wall in between your hands and the boiling water. So it gets really hot. So it's
Got it. Okay, so
sometimes,
you're
yeah,
pouring
so a lot of
boiling
people,
water.
yes. So I've
Okay.
seen a lot of people getting like little sleeves of out of leather or felt or somewhere to put around it, so it's not that hot when you touch it. But yeah,
Little
so
gloves.
far I managed to hold it with bare hands. It's
Yep.
okay. But yeah, it gets quite hot.
Yeah, I'll bet it does. All right. GoPresso, nanopresso. That's really cool. And it's a very tiny house friendly way of making coffee.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what other technology do you have in the tiny house?
So I scaled down a lot. So I'm also currently doing a PhD in machine learning. So I had a quite huge like energy hungry machine learning computer next to my desk.
Okay.
And I now scaled this down to just my laptop and the external GPU. So everything needs to get smaller in a way. And
Yes.
yeah, I think like my partner and I, we both go with notebooks now. We have a big TV, and also like a
Uh-huh.
little other PC below the TV that we use for gaming, and also we run like a home assistant where we can control all electric stuff, measure how
Yep.
much energy we get from the solar cells, and so on.
Nice.
And I think
Nice.
that's most of the tech. And for water heating, we have not sure what the proper term is, an instant flow heater. So just water
Okay.
flows through and gets instantly heated. There's no boiler, like there's no water tank.
Yep. On demand is what we would call it, but
Mhm.
instant flow.
I,
Gotcha. And and then it just looks like
we have a washing
everything.
machine actually.
Oh, wow. Excellent.
Yeah, there's like the transition area between the two rooms. There's like a little niche, and there's one full-sized washing machine, and on top there's a bit of space left, and this is where we currently hang our like coats and rain jackets and stuff.
Yep. Yep. No, it looks, even though it's tiny, it looks like actually it feels kind of expansive. Like there's a lot of different spaces in the house, and just all that light really probably makes it feel a lot bigger than it really is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Kodasema did a really, really good job on interior design on this house.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
it feels very thought through. So makes great concept overall. Like everything fits together and works really well. I think there's one con that some people mention is when you want to go into the bathroom, you basically walk through the kitchen, and this is something that some people don't like that much to have this so close together. So
Yeah.
far we had no issues with that, but I've heard
Yeah.
this from several people. That's the one point that they mentioned that
That's
they would
fair.
like to have changed maybe.
It is, of course, much more of, it's very efficient to put the bathroom and the kitchen together because all the plumbing, all the water lines can just be in that one wall.
Exactly.
That's a pretty common thing in tiny houses, and yeah, it's personal preference. Have there been any surprises, good or bad, about tiny living?
I think we thought it through quite a lot. So I don't think there were like huge surprises. When we set it up, we had a lot of weird visitors suddenly standing in our garden, and we're like, "Oh, what is this? Is this a house?"
Yeah.
Like we live. Yeah, as I said, we live very rural, so people are sort of noisy, and they just come over and take a look at what new thing popped up in the neighborhood.
Okay, so it attracts a lot of attention.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, but besides, I don't think like we are still very happy after 1 year living in here, and we would do it the same way again. No regrets. Works very well with our way of living.
Cool. Well, that's great. And so when you did this, were you thinking that it would be for a set period of time, or you're just like, this is it, this is the house for as long as we care to live there?
Yeah, I think more on the later side. So we are planning to live here as long as possible. This is also why we decided for the 2-room version, also to have the opportunity to start a family maybe one day. So you have one room left that could be used for a child maybe, and then I use my stuff somewhere else.
Nice.
And we are also thinking on extending maybe a bit. So there are nice other tiny houses that are made just to be like outdoor offices maybe. And in case my partner also starts to completely work from home, it might make sense to have a separate room for him to work. This is something we are currently considering because the property is quite big, so we would have placed at another tiny weird shed for him to work.
Yeah, I really love that. I think it makes a lot of sense, rather than making your house bigger, to just add, if you can, small, like single room, single function spaces as needed. You know, a shed for an office, a shed for an art studio. I even know,
absolutely.
I know some tiny house people that as their children kind of got into their teenage years, the kids actually built their own little tiny room separate from the tiny house.
Awesome.
That was their space to live in.
I really like the idea. And in Germany, we currently have the problem that there are a lot of empty old houses that were built like 60 years ago, when the idea was that you have this multi-generation house, right, where you have like the parents have their children, and they also maybe have their grandparents still in there. So it's like a full house where 3 generations live in. And these are way too big now and way too expensive to to keep up,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all they are all breaking down now over time. This is super sad to see, and I think
Yeah.
having a more modular way of living, like with these yeah tiny house tiny houses or prefab modules, makes a lot more sense for modern lifestyles.
Yeah. So is there any kind of tiny house community that you're connected with? Other people living tiny near you?
Yeah, sadly, not yet. Like, there are some houses popping up now, and I'm starting to reach out to people, but there's no huge community I'm connected to, sadly, so far.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Um, well, I've really enjoyed speaking with you. I just before we finished, I wanted to ask you about your art and what things that you sell on your website and what you're working on.
Yeah, so I enjoy generative art a lot. So this is basically art that is created with code
Okay.
in some way or the other.
Okay.
And I enjoy to make physical things out of it. So I have a pen plotter, for example. So I draw some artworks with a drawing robot, basically, or
Okay.
even with my CNC machine or laser cutter. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of different things. And what I also enjoy is open sourcing my project. So
Okay.
everyone can use it or make their own art with it. So
Cool.
if you are interested in something, I don't know, generative or tech related art, then check out my website or my YouTube.
Nice. And I'll put the photos of your tiny house and links to your website and other online profiles on the show notes
Awesome.
page for
Thanks a lot.
this episode so people can find you there. Well, Sabina, Bleeptrack, thank you so much. This was so fun.
Thanks so much for having me. I super enjoyed our little talk together. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much to Bleeptrack, aka Sabina, for being a guest on the show today. You can find the show notes, including photos of Sabina's tiny house and a complete transcript of the episode, and links to Sabina's work online at thetinyhouse.net/260. Again, that's thetinyhouse.net/260. Well, that's all for this week. I'm your host, Ethan Waldman, and I'll be back next week with another episode of the Tiny House Lifestyle Podcast.